The Breakfast Room, a construction project management game for Year 6 children. Created by Dr. Ian Stewart of the University of Manchester and Mr. Mark Ford of Beaumont Morgan. This video will show you a Lego-based construction project management game designed by Ian Stewart and Mark Ford. Pedagogic justification of game design, main components of the game play, the game in use with Year 6 children, although it won't have video of the children due to GDPR and privacy concerns, feedback from the children, and development plans for the game. The Breakfast Room project management game is a Lego-based construction project management game for Year 6 pupils to build a freestanding breakfast room for their primary school. The aim was to teach basic project management theory, construction project management techniques, and associated life skills in a fun and accessible way for children. And they said it couldn't be done, or at least the Association for Project Management in the Northwest had looked into project management education for children as a possibility and had decided that it was difficult with a very uncertain return. This is how the game is introduced to the children. Breakfast rooms and breakfast clubs are a feature of many school children's lives, and they're told they'll be building it out of Lego, which sets a note of excitement, though of course they've already seen the Lego in the room waiting for them. This is a team-based game. The children are divided into 3 teams. There is the project management team that manages the scope, delivers the final design according to the budget, creates schedule, creates procurement requests to give to the supplier team. The supplier team have all of the cost data and they assemble prefabricated parts, and according to the lead time data that they have, they then make these available for purchase. They receive purchase orders and then they release the construction parts to the construction and logistics team, who collect the materials, check the quality, transport them to site, and assemble the parts into the breakfast room. This game can be played with between 10 and 15 children at one time. There were a number of factors in play in the creation of this game. First of all, it is an academic-industrial partnership. Mark Ford from Beaumont Morgan was being challenged to deliver social value to the community in which his construction project was situated, and this is becoming very common now in the UK construction industry, this need to return social value. The focus for his particular project was a primary school that was in the vicinity of his construction project. The APM, the Association for Project Management, the leading chartered institute in the project management industry, claimed that project management should be a life skill for all. If PM is truly a life skill, then it's important to start learning it at an early age. But can it be taught to children? And if so, how? And of course, if project management can be taught, is it possible then to integrate STEM, construction industry practice, and sustainability themes? These are important questions for developing a generation of young people who are familiar with sustainable construction project management and see it as a first career. The school has a particular interest in developing interests in these areas. And finally, it was seen as a very relevant project to a primary school in this area. A purpose-built breakfast room was chosen because it is becoming a common part of primary schools in many deprived areas. The following are the intended learning outcomes of this game. These were determined in discussion with the head teacher. We see here the combination of construction elements, life skill elements, and project management elements. Ultimately, the children will complete practical work under realistic constraints of cost and time. The pedagogic design of the game was guided by the race model. The various categories of the race model lead to associated design points in the game. Toward the end of the model, verbalising and assessing, these stages are necessary to ensure that the learning is driven home, that the children are aware that they weren't simply having fun with Lego for the afternoon, but that there was a realistic problem with realistic detail set for them, and that the learning is also real. They have really engaged with teamwork, with leadership, with giving instruction. There is a lessons learned activity that enables them to make judgments of their competence and to even discuss how the game could be improved. The game is part of an overall 2-hour teaching session, as can be seen in this diagram. It begins with a lecture, then there is the planning phase, then there is the construction phase, and then the debrief, where the lessons learned activity takes place. This is key to learning and ensuring that the children have made sense of what they have experienced, what can be quite an intense experience. The session begins with a lecture. Here you can see me delivering the lecture to the children. The children have to go through a certain amount of project management theory in order to be able to perform the tasks and complete the construction. What surprised me was that a lot of children already knew what project management was through their parents' work. As we introduced the key pieces of theory, it was important that the children were given examples that they could use immediately and small lecturer-led activities so that they could use that concept quickly and see how it would apply to the game. The first fundamental piece of theory was the iron triangle, or the Barnes triangle. In order to claim to be a successful project, a project has to deliver on 3 dimensions: the quality and scope, so it has to be what the client was expecting. It has to be delivered on time, to the agreed deadlines, and it has to be delivered to the agreed cost. There should be no surprises for the client. At the end of the lecture, we looked at what happens when we push down on any point of this triangle. Each point affects the other points. If we try to push down on time to enable a piece of work to be done faster, then generally that will cause an increase in cost and possibly a reduction in quality and scope. The children understood this concept intuitively. Next came scheduling. The children were quite familiar with the idea of a deadline for work to be done by, but we introduced concepts such as earliest start, latest start, duration, task order. The scenarios that were chosen for these examples were purposely chosen because they are relatable for the children. They demonstrate the concept in practice, and so they can see its use in action immediately. There was a lot of laughing as I suggested some impractical order for events on the next slide. So I extended the discussion of scheduling to include the Gantt chart as a scheduling tool and the problem of getting to school on time or not. Keeping the tone light and keeping the laughs coming was important, so I suggested innovations such as getting dressed before we have a wash or eating breakfast before we wake up. The children quickly understood the idea of precedence of activity and the ways in which we can use the Gantt chart to innovate our activity if it appears that we are not meeting our agreed deadlines. Costing and bottom-up and top-down costing were introduced with the idea of a pizza party and planning for a pizza party. From this then, we can derive the appropriate budget for our project. The children were introduced to Moscow analysis. Must have, should have, could have, won't have. This is a tool to work out what the client's priorities really are, and so to make appropriate design choices. The project management team got to use this tool immediately when they broke up into their teams to play the game. Finally, the children are given a look at the kind of thing they could produce if the budget allows them to. This was important so that when they began their sketching work, they could sketch with the finished product in mind. That helped them to focus their design ideas and to keep them realistic and appropriate for the game. From this it can be seen that construction is based on the use of prefabricated panels, glazing units and door units, and that there are potential extras such as a rooftop garden, aero generators and exterior lighting. When the teaching session is finished, the children then go to their tables in their teams and read their instructions. Here you see the supplier instructions, the project management team instructions, and the construction and logistic instructions. I was careful to ensure that the instructions did not go over 1 page in length, though it's clear the project management team has the most to do, so they then are the larger team. Construction is a smaller team, just 2 children, but they probably have the most fun as they get to actually build the structure from Lego. Over the next few scenes, I'm now going to talk you through the documentation that they use and the decisions that the children have to make that drive the game along. Here is the design support document for the project management team, and here is the supplier catalogue for the supplier team. Do you notice the difference between the two? Only the suppliers have the costs. The project management team have incomplete information. And so when it comes to developing their designs, they have to collaborate with the suppliers team to see what of the scope is actually possible within the budget that they have. This then leads to decisions and elements of their design perhaps being removed or changed once they get that cost information from the suppliers. The project management team perform their Moscow analysis in order to refine their designs and deliver what the client wants within the budget that they are given. The children were given a number of options to make choices between. Should they have basic chairs for the children or nice chairs? Should there be a rooftop garden or not? The client wanted a lot of natural light, which would suggest a lot of glass panels, but these were the most expensive panels. How many could reasonably be afforded in the budget that they had? What was interesting was that children immediately cut down on all of the fancy fittings and cut down on the glazing options in order to make budget available for the environmental options, the rooftop garden and the aero generators. The main structural design choices the children had was the proportion of prefabricated panels that would be used. There were blank wall panels, door panels and glazing panels. The children seemed to have problems understanding the combinations that were available to them and the order that these would have to be assembled into to create the wall panels. What I stumbled on was to make it a joke, to make it fun. So we used we for window, wa for wall and do for door. So then a completed panel could be wa 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 wa, or wa we wa, or wa we do wa. The children started finding this very, very funny, and then it helped them to be able to lay out the required sub-panels to create the wall panels that they needed to order. Finally, all of the design choices were transferred to the project costing document, just to be sure that the finished design could actually be delivered to the budget. Here we see the slab being transferred from the supply catalogue to the project costing document. Once the costing document is complete, it becomes apparent that there is too much glass in the design, and so the glass panels get replaced by blank wall panels. With the project fully designed and costed, the project management team now needs to place procurement orders with the supplier team to ensure that the components are available at the supplier team and then can be transported to the construction team who will build the structure. The parts have to be available to the right quantity and at the right time, and delivered at the right time. So in order to work out time, the project management team now needs to develop a schedule, and they are given a Gantt chart to do this. They've been introduced to the Gantt chart in the teaching session, and now the children have to produce a Gantt chart for themselves. To save time, I pre-made the various Gantt bars. All the children had to do was just put the tasks in the right order and then read off from the Gantt chart when orders had to be placed and when components needed to be delivered by. Here you see a completed Gantt chart. The project begins with the slab and the wall panels being ordered, and it ends with the aerogenerators being fitted onto the roof and the furniture being put inside the building. Here we see a purchase order for wall panels being made. We can see that the order is composed of wall panel, door panel and glazing panel to suit the design configuration. We can see from the Gantt chart that this order has to be placed in order for the panels to be delivered at day 16, and it will take until day 20 for them to be fully fitted. The purchase orders then go to the supplier team. The project management team has already had dealings with the supplier team over the costing and design work. The costs that this game uses are realistic. They were set by a quantity surveyor from Beaumont Morgan. As you can see in the picture, the children of the supplier team prefabricate and sort the main structural components. Of course, with Lego in the room, the challenge of the supplier team was to keep everybody's hands off it, even though they should really be simply standing around their table doing their work. But the girls of the supplier team were fierce in asserting that nothing left their store without a signed purchase order. When each order is ready, the supplier completes a supplier delivery note to be sent with the order. Here you can see the delivery note for wall panels being produced. At a time dictated by the schedule, the construction team would travel to the supply team to pick up the goods, and they would check the quality of the goods against the delivery note. If they were not happy with the quality, the goods were rejected. If they were happy with them, the goods were transported to their site table where assembly would happen. As can be seen here, construction is very straightforward. Prefabricated construction was chosen because this is an area of interest in the construction industry for cost saving and sustainability purposes. It also makes construction for the children more straightforward as well. As you can see, the structure can be rapidly assembled. The project management team, with their work mostly done, with the placing of the final procurement orders, drifted over to the construction team in order to stand behind them, shout encouragement at them, and to show them the Gantt chart and where they should be by day 16 or day 17 or whenever it was that they were pointing to. One thing that has to be emphasised is that part of the game element, although there was no real competition as such, they were competing against a sped up clock where one day on the schedule was equivalent to 1 minute in the classroom. So they were competing against the clock, and the project management team felt this very keenly and made sure the construction team knew about it. It was clear that, as per the client brief, the final design could sit 30 children, although we only had 10 Lego minifigs at that moment. The children completed their project, they met the client's scope, they were able to add in environmental features, but they achieved this 5 days ahead of schedule and still brought it in under budget. This made me wonder if perhaps I'd made it too easy, made the game too forgiving. Well, I have some ideas for that, which I will show you in the development section. For the debrief phase of the game, I used the lessons learned technique, which is a typical end phase activity of any well-managed project, so that what went well and what did not go well can be transferred as learning from that project into future projects in the organisation. So it was realistic and reasonable to include this activity at the end of the game. The children were asked 2 very simple questions. What did you learn about project management? And what advice would you give project managers based on your experience? They said that project management was stressful. Certainly the sped up clock gave them some stress. They said that there was lots of paper and information which easily got out of control. They seemed to feel that suppliers were able to just lie back and wait for the money to flow in. And they said that project managers of the future should try to stay calm, do things ahead of schedule if they can, and should provide snacks for project workers when there are delays. Perhaps the final suggestion was not realistic for adult construction project management situations. However, between the lines it can be seen that they had had an experience which reflected actual practice. They had come to terms with dealing with a demanding situation where they were able to deliver things under constraints of scope, cost, and time. This is the very soul of project management. In so doing, of course, they'd experienced many other things, these life skills that the APM is interested in, and that teachers are interested in ensuring their children have, to make them resilient and also to make them employable in the future. At the end of the game, the children were given a project management certificate. I was surprised at how excited they got about this and how proudly they ran out of the room holding their certificates high. Reflecting on the intended learning outcomes, it was apparent that what had been intended to be experienced by the children was actually experienced. Observing the actions of the children, listening to their feedback, the feedback of teachers that were in the room with us, the head teacher, proved that this means of teaching project management is successful. Currently, there is nothing like this in the market that successfully combines project management theory with construction industry practice and aimed at Year 6 children. There are plans for the development of this game. The game was made quite forgiving following the advice of the head teacher due to concerns over the resilience of Year 6 pupils. However, having seen just how well they can cope with this particular challenge, and possibly with view to expanding the game for older participants, we have the following options for making it more challenging. The inclusion of risk events. Perhaps these risk events, such as bad weather or a supplier delay, can be dealt with through a deck of cards, or a roll of the dice, or a spin of a risk wheel, adding a certain extra play and risk element to the game. Perhaps the game could be played with competing suppliers who might compete on price or delivery speed, or who may have different levels of inventory available to promise. The game could be played with competing projects, which would further limit the available supply. The budget could be lowered, requiring more value engineering and possibly even client negotiation to adjust the scope in order to meet the budget. A broader range of construction options could be included in the breakfast room design. For example, different roof profiles, different environmental features, different furnishings, new panel combinations for the walls. And finally, there could be new kinds of structure for more complex and challenging projects, such as a forest classroom, or a bus station, or an offshore wind farm. There are also development plans I have in mind for this kind of activity. The expanding role of social value in construction projects means that major contractors are looking for ways to deliver, in some cases, millions of pounds of benefit to the communities in which their construction projects are situated. Manchester City Council Construction Skills Network invited me to present my game to the major construction companies in the area. From this meeting, Laing O'Rourke approached me to build a version of this game for their corporate social responsibility department. So it is clear that there is a demand for this kind of game, this kind of teaching and learning activity for Year 6 children. I hope you've found this demonstration of the Breakfast Room project management game interesting. Thank you for watching.